It's now my pleasure to introduce you to Baroness Pauline Neville-Jones, former Minister of State for Security and Counter-Terrorism, and current Special Representative to Business on Cybersecurity, United Kingdom. And the Baroness has been here before, and you are always a welcome guest at our ICT conferences, and we hope you come to more. And just a few words about you, Pauline. Pauline was a career diplomat, during which time she served in British missions in Rhodesia, Singapore, Washington, and Bonn. In addition to which, she was Deputy Secretary to the Cabinet and head of the Defense and Overseas Secretariat in the Cabinet Office, and was Chairman of the Joint Intelligence Committee in her past. In addition to which, in January 2006, she was appointed by David Cameron to the head of the Conservative Party's National and International Security Policy Group, and then appointed the Shadow Security Minister and National Security Advisor to the Leader of the Opposition. She took the title of Baroness Neville-Jones of Hutton Roof in the county of Cumbria on entry into the House of Lords in October 2007. And in May 2010, Pauline was appointed Minister for Security and stepped down from this role in May 2011. I can't think of a wiser and more experienced woman from the UK who can enlighten us in this field. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that extremely warm welcome. And it's a convention to say it's a pleasure to be here, but it is, and I mean it from the heart. It is a pleasure to be here. It's also an honor. I am deeply honored to be asked to contribute to and play a part in this commemorative occasion. I think that those of us who are here this morning could not be anything but moved by the testimony that we heard from those who have been involved and affected. And I want to add my personal condolences to those who, particularly to the families who are here and those who are not able to be here. I think it's probably fair to say that one of the best things that my country can do in holding the 2012 Olympics is to ensure that there is no repetition of that terrible event. We want to ensure that the wickedness that was perpetrated in Munich on the 11 athletes, and indeed the German policeman who lost his life with them, is not repeated. And our effort in London on the security front has been directed primarily at that, though I have to say, and I will go into some detail now, not solely at the terrorist threat. It is, I think, and sadly, the case that international events of this kind, and the London Olympics are now only 6 weeks away, international events of this kind are ones that now attract evildoers, wrongdoers, troublemakers, and you can see it in the events, the big events that take place around the world, that there is a tendency for people to try and exploit these occasions for their own ends. And so there are several challenges that any organizing country, any hosting country, has to cope with, and I will talk briefly about those as well as about the tourist threat. This is not a country, I think, without experience, has been, I think, acknowledged by previous speakers. We won the competition for the London Olympics on the 6th of July, 2005, and on the 7th of July, 7/7, the city experienced the only major terrorist outrage in which the conspirators came close to achieving all of their aims, all of their evil aims. 52 commuters died and over 700 people were injured. So right from the outset of our preparations for the Olympics taking place this year, we had the terrible illustration of what a successful terrorist attempt can bring about and the threat that we have to meet. And our preparations have been geared accordingly. I'm not going to take you into all of the detail of the preparations. First of all, it would be take me all afternoon. And secondly, I hope you will accept and agree that many of the things that we have done are ones necessarily that we need to keep confidential. Security is partly composed of not allowing those who might wish to know what we would not wish them to understand about the preparations that we've made. Broadly speaking, as I say, there are probably three broad categories of threat that one has to deal with such large events. Serious crime, potentially, if not actually, violent protest. Peaceful protest is one thing, but violent protest quite another. And, of course, terrorism. And I'm going to talk, obviously, mostly about terrorism because that is by far the leading risk. But I think it's worth noting one or two things about the other two risks that we face. Conventional criminality is obviously a feature of any large event. I mean, anybody knows that if you go into a crowd, you know you risk at least a pickpocket. But there is, these days, another threat to this kind of big event, and of course it is the cyber threat. It is very easy, actually, to screw up, if I might put it that way, the purchase of tickets. And we have made ticket touting illegal, and we have taken the greatest possible pains, and cybersecurity is a national priority. There's a lot of money behind it, quite separately from the Olympics. We have made it a priority to ensure that actually the ticketing works. So I say, with a certain due caution, we do believe that those who bought tickets have received them, and those who were not entitled to have not actually managed to procure them. So far, we haven't had evidence of successful criminal activity. Now, containment of protests, and there's been quite a lot of discussion earlier on about containment, and containment is an important word in all of this, but containment of protest to minimize disruption to participants and spectators is I suppose, a second area of preparation. Now, I think it's fair to say, ladies and gentlemen, that the UK has a long and pretty honourable, and by and large, pretty successful history of peaceful policing of protest. As the ambassador said, well over 1 million people were on the streets to watch the Queen's Jubilee when she went down the river, and even more at the concert in front of Buckingham Palace. These were mass events. You don't actually organize those, you know, without an extraordinarily underlying degree of security preparation. There were no incidents, it turned out, and there were, over the 4 days, 12 arrests. I must say that one of the things that public order policing shares increasingly with successful counter-terrorism is good, real-time intelligence. Mr. Javid said it, and I agree with him. It is one of the indispensable keys if you want to have any chance of being up with the game, ahead of the game, or even in the game. It is, you know, one of the keys. And we have invested very greatly in that, all over London, all over the Olympic sites, and obviously particularly the main Olympic venue. Since 9/11, and obviously since 7/7 in London, the UK has poured very significant extra resources into what were, I think, already well-developed and experienced intelligence agencies. And it has, in fact, been a transformational process in relation, most especially, to the domestic intelligence base. And it's also underpinned much closer intelligence cooperation between ourselves and other countries abroad, not least, I might say, Israel, than we have had in the past. And one of the things that I think is worth underlying is the extent and the degree of close cooperation on terrorism matters between the UK and Israel. But in the UK these days, multi-team agencies work together on issues and individual cases, and that the fact that the agencies themselves cooperate closely leads obviously to much more effective exploitation of available intelligence. And as some people in this audience will know, and here I'm going to go into a little bit of technical stuff. The UK currently has a, quote, substantial terrorist threat. That's our assessment of where the level of our terrorist threat, which means, you translate the jargon into there still being a strong possibility of a terrorist attack. A threat level, however, which is lower than the severe level, which we have for quite some time, and that means that a terrorist attack is highly likely. So there is a real difference between there still being one and it being highly likely. And we have obviously partly been able to reduce that level of risk by much greater defensive capability, increasing security, which we've developed over time. Now, we're not complacent, either about the threat level, nor are we willing to take risks in meeting it. And we've therefore preferred to take a conservative and precautionary stance. And therefore, in relation to the terrorist countermeasures concerning the Olympics, we have taken our precautions and our measures to meet the higher severe level that I just told you about, rather than the current general level, and indeed to superimpose on that surge capabilities, which will be capable of dealing with any top level status, the so-called critical, which is, of course, the threat level you reach if you really do believe that an attack is imminent. So what we have here is a level of precautions designed to meet a threat higher than the one we believe actually prevails. We believe that that is the right thing to do, and we think that it's right to have both deployed and in reserve resources to meet those extra contingencies. And we have had, as the ambassador said, a separate substantial ring-fenced budget for security. It's over $1 billion. And that is in addition to the very substantial security and homeland security budget that we already operate, and of course the availability of our armed forces, which are financed on the military budget. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are not stinting the resources, but we believe it right actually to have them available and to make sure that actually everything that we can do by way of bringing our resources to bear is done. So, in this better safe than sorry approach, and building in capability and building in a capability margin in all our arrangements, we've taken that view right across all aspects of security. And I'm going to now just talk about three intertwined issues which I think illustrate the approach. The one of venues, buildings and venues, people, competitors and spectators, and such things as transport, especially mass transit. And I'm going to just say a few words on each. On the question of buildings and sites, the ambassador said we want these to be the most accessible Olympics. And it's very, very important if you are putting out a message, particularly in relation to the Paralympics, where the UK is a pioneer, that actually people do believe, this is going to be something for them, and accessibility matters. But by God, security does too. And we have designed, therefore, an Olympic venue which is effectively an island. That's partly the result of the geography of the place chosen, but it's also very much the result of design. I'm not going to go into the detail, but I can assure you that actually it's very hard, if not, I hope, impossible, to get into that site except by the authorized, policed, surveilled routes. And indeed, everything else that is not authorized is also surveilled. So he does give, I hope, greater effectiveness to perimeter security, which is not what we, of course, rely on entirely, but it is the first ring. And everyone attending the games will unnecessarily be aware of that security, because it will be airport-style, individual searching of all ticket holders. And we are taking sort of the following sorts of measures. You may not take a water bottle in with you. Drinking water will be available in the venue free. We're not going to take any risks. And there are further precautions in connection with the Olympic Village itself, and that is obviously a matter of particular concern to a country like Israel. And I won't go into detail, but what I can tell you is that it is separately and extremely, access to it and its security is separately and rigorously controlled. And there will be also appropriate levels, which will be agreed with the teams, of protection provided at the team training sites. Because obviously, teams come in early to the country in order to train in local conditions. And as the Ambassador mentioned, from the outset, an element of the UK's approach has been security by design. The buildings not only look beautiful, and they are very striking, some of them, but they have been designed quite deliberately to reduce the chances of devices either being successfully planted in them or, ladies and gentlemen, embedded in them beforehand. And we know we've had experience of that. And all the workers who have been on the sites and supplied to them, and also the suppliers who supply the sites, have had all of their workers checked, their identity, their credentials, against both crime and immigration databases. We've done our very best to ensure that those who actually have had access to the site well before have themselves no ulterior motives and no possibilities either of doing malicious activity, engaging in malicious activity. On people, well, clearly there are two major aspects when it comes to people: how we preclude terrorists from getting access under false pretenses, and providing preventative security to participants. And by that I include, obviously, spectators as well. And this has to be for the entire duration of both sets of games. Now, the first of those has required a very great deal of upstream work, establishing the credentials of all the participants and of the broader so-called Olympic family. And the second, that's to say protection, has involved a massive organization of public order policing based on training, exercising, and at all moments, as I said, good real-time intelligence. Now, our immigration services have been working on visas and passenger lists for many months, and on arrival in London there will be special facilities to deal smoothly with the immigration credentials of people coming in and accreditation, and particularly obviously at Heathrow, where the bulk of athletes and members of the Games families will arrive. And there will be special facilities for those. They will not be queuing up at the normal gates. Actually, the real, I think, bulge and weight of flight and people using the terminal will actually come rather more at the end of the Games than at the beginning. People tend to come in, teams come in at separate times to train, but everybody's going to leave pretty quickly at the end. And so the test of our ability just simply to get a throughput of people, I think, is going to be more on departure than on arrival. I've already mentioned public order policing, and the core and bulk of this obviously was going to be provided by the police constabularies around the country, which have been training for many months, especially for this task, and they will be joined by a number of teams of people, in fact many numbers of teams of people who have been specially recruited and specially retrained for security purposes. These trained volunteers will obviously be engaged in the less sensitive tasks, so that the police, some of whom have been trained and given special training in the use of arms, and not just ordinary arms, will enable them then to concentrate on the absolute core and the high-end tasks. And soldiers will also be on hand to provide some of the services, and there will be some visibility of the military. Now, security has to be efficient as well as effective, because if it isn't efficient, then it absolutely ruins everything. And the last thing we want is for security to protrude and for enjoyment to be subjected to it. Providing the appropriate volume as well as quality of security facilities really is important. And we've tried, therefore, not to stint on how we do that, so that there can be efficient processing of all the people who want to move around. I mean, you have great masses of people in different places. And it is important, ladies and gentlemen, obviously, to secure not only the official sites, but all those so-called unofficial places, like the screens in the parks, where many thousands of people are going to be gathered together watching on screens. Their safety is as important, and you might regard them as being a soft target. They have to be protected because it's very easy to ruin the games. You don't, as a terrorist, it was rightly said, the terrorist looks for the weak point. If you've got a very hard target in the main venue, then you go to a softer target. We have to protect what might otherwise be regarded as a softer target. Finally, perhaps transport, because transport is, a big element. Now, getting people around London, the games family and the spectators, I won't deny to you, is a headache. London is a large, it's a city, 6 to 8 million, depending on how you count it. It's crowded, it's a commuter city, and it has very heavily used overground and underground transport. Now, the plus side of all of that is that we do actually know how to transport masses of people on given occasions to a timetable. The negative is that the transport systems are already operating to overcapacity. Continuous upgrades in capacity and reliability have been continuously brought about, and there has been a steady program of improvement, particularly in the London Underground, with the Olympics in mind. And the numbers of normal London commuters will be reduced for the period of the Games by extensive working from home in both the public and private sectors, so we aim to free up capacity. So the aim is obviously secure and easy transport. Necessarily, a transport system is open. It is not possible totally to secure a transport system of that kind, and we couldn't operate on that basis. But I would like to say that as part of general counter-terrorism and safety measures, there has in the past decade been a major upscaling of security precautions on public transport, particularly the underground, using latest technology. And you've read the word, I think, cutting edge was used, and cutting edge technology is certainly being deployed in the Olympics. So that we do have a situation now in which there's very little that goes unobserved inside the underground system. And there will obviously be additional security measures taken for the time of the Games, and especially at big transport junctions. So we are very mindful of the vulnerability of transport systems, and I think any security expert knows that actually this is one of the hardest things to protect, and we're doing our very best to ensure that what are called crowded places are properly protected. Now, counter-terrorism experts will also be familiar with what are known in the trade as the high-end risks, those types of threats where the likelihood of a successful attempt may be comparatively low, but where the consequences could be devastating. And here, obviously, ladies and gentlemen, the key has to be prevention. And there are a number of these risks featuring on the permanent UK National Risk Register. We don't just you do not start in the UK from the background of doing something specially without a very high platform that already exists of risk assessment and risk management in the UK. And we have a permanent National Risk Register which is constantly updating, and we exercise and prepare against that. And it includes such things as a chemical attack or indeed the sort of roving terrorist incident of the type that was seen in Mumbai. So as I say, we in any case plan against and exercise against such risks as part of normal security. Evidently, those that are most relevant to the Olympics have been specially reviewed and especially exercised for, not least, I might say, ladies and gentlemen, in relation to command and control. And there will be extensive on-call backup provided in part by our military, including our special forces, for such eventualities. And some of you, as indeed was mentioned, I think, by one of the speakers, that there are indeed anti-aircraft emplacements that have gone up to guard the airspace over central London, including the venue. And there will be a protected and controlled fly zone for the duration of the Games. And appropriate precautions are also in place on the Thames. As you know, Thames is quite a big river, and it's a working river, and so we need to have taken precautions there too. Now, I mentioned exercising. It's vital. I use that word advisedly. It's vital that that should anything go wrong, which heaven forbid, that those involved in handling the consequences know what they are doing and what is expected of them. And above all, who is in charge. Now, British counter-terrorist doctrine has 4 parts, and one of these is consequence mitigation and management. And all crises obviously are different and require different responses, but you nevertheless, I think, can embed certain principles and certain routines in procedure, because there are common features to them all. And rehearsal and testing is a crucial part of good crisis management. And I'm glad to say that actually from the highest level down, that's to say, and I mean the highest level down, the Prime Minister, the highest level ministerial level down, there has been a program of exercising in relation to the emergency response to be brought across both the blue light services, the military, and indeed the voluntary service, against scenarios of which the participants did not have prior information. We tried to make it as real as we could, and I can tell you the red teams were busy making it very complicated for those who were trying to actually respond to the crisis that they were faced. That program has proved salutary and instructive, very, very helpful in upgrading and raising confidence in ability actually to handle emergencies competently. One has, I think, ladies and gentlemen, to plan for bad weather, in the metaphorical sense as well as fair. And I think that I would like to say that the United Kingdom will not hesitate to use our armed assets, or indeed to use force, if we have to. Now, I hope I've been able to give you an insight into the UK approach to the security of these games. The ambassador rightly said that the British public have become immensely enthusiastic about them as the games have approached. Having started off not sure whether they really wanted to have these games on British soil, there's no doubt about the national enthusiasm and the great hope that we, and I sense it here too, that our teams will do well in the medals. But above all, we want everybody to have a good time, not to have to worry about their personal security, because we've taken care of it properly. And therefore, we've tried to plan for all the hazards that we can envisage. We believe in acquiring good intelligence and making it available to those who need it on a real-time basis, and there is an elaborate infrastructure for doing that. We believe in good protection via technology and well-commanded, trained individuals, and in the preparation against emergency. And though some may wonder of the games being held in a country with a substantial international terrorist threat, I would argue, ladies and gentlemen, that the very seriousness and professionalism that the UK brings to countering terrorism, our success in doing so and our long experience is a sounder basis on which to have confidence in the security of the London 2012 Games as you could wish. Now, some very clear messages have been transmitted today, and I hear them. And as I said at the outset, in London, we aim to honor the memory of the Israeli athletes who died in Munich in the best way possible by preventing a repetition. Thank you very much.